Oh, the kangaroo!
Scouse ponce.
Yeah.
The land of folk.
And old iron, old iron. Oh, no.
It's June 1967 and the Pink Floyd are in swinging London. The age of Aquarius is dawning and the band are standing at the gates of it. Groovy, baby.
That cat's something I can't explain.
What isn't so groovy though is the incredible pressure that the band are under, with a daily succession of recording sessions, TV appearances and late night concerts. These things hit a peak in mid-July when at one point the band are literally crisscrossing the entire country, with each day in a different location with no breaks in between. After this particularly grueling week, Syd Barrett disappeared for the weekend and by all accounts returned a different man. Those connected to him have consistently told the same version of the story, that the change in Syd's character at this exact time was stark and sudden, and over the next few weeks gigs were cancelled, with press reports at the time citing Barrett's nervous exhaustion. Syd was known to be experimenting a lot with LSD at this time, but in this particular month, a new super strength variation of the drug arrived in swinging London. Known as STP, an acronym for Serenity, Tranquility and Peace, its effects were set to last for days as opposed to LSD's hours, and it took a much longer time to kick in, leading to many people taking far too much of it.
Why do you have to leave me there, hanging in my infantile, waiting?
About 20% of its users never fully recover from it, so the question here is, was Syd Barrett one of its victims?
Tell me more.
The truth is that no one knows or will ever know, but the timing of this drug's arrival on the scene and Syd's reported change could be more than a coincidence. Syd's demise is one of the most well-told stories in music history, with myth, madcap and memory becoming so blurred it's difficult to get a true picture from anyone as to what actually happened. Every person connected with this story seems to have a different perspective on it than the next one, and some of these actual accounts and views themselves have changed over the years.
My book is closed, I read no more.
There are many reasons for this, but the main one is that these people were only ever with Syd for parts of his life. Some people seem to blame the drugs completely, whilst others almost dismiss their impact totally. Personally, I think that the truth is somewhere in between, with underlying mental health issues and Syd's own utter boredom and frustration with being restricted by the corporate music machine being just as much an influence on his fate, which at this point in the story at least, many seem to think he was choosing to take. However, despite his sudden change, the Floyd's frontman didn't just disappear overnight, and many would argue some of his best music came after this period. It's a puzzling tale, and it's one that's seen me rewrite these words several times over. It's almost like there are two parallel and completely different versions of the events, almost as if there were two different Syds at play over the whole period. One is the ever-playful bohemian poet, but there's a new one emerging, more rambling, ramshackled and unreliable, with an ever increasingly random precision. In saying all this, over 1967, Sid continued to write and record an album's worth of new material for the Floyd's second album, one that saw the band set their controls for a different path. Let's now follow its trajectory and discover more about the tracks that did and didn't make it onto this album.
Lean out of the window.
The first track to be recorded for the new album sees the band set course into the cosmos with this ethereal, Eastern-sounding mantra. Like Barrett had done with Piper's Chapter 24, here Roger Waters adapts random lines from the I Ching, an ancient book on Chinese philosophy, whilst the science fiction setting was inspired by writer Michael Moorcroft.
Little by little, the night turns around, counting the leaves which tremble at dawn.
Waters' soft, cyclic lines are perfectly complemented by Mason's rotating drum pattern and Wright's swirling, dreamlike organ, all of which seem to be designed to hypnotize the listener.
Set the controls for the heart of the sun.
On the studio version, only a few fleeting whispers of Sid's guitar could be heard. However, when it was played live, the track reached a much louder climax, with Sid's abstract crashing guitar taking the track to a new level, one that lays the foundation blocks for the band's new progressive era. Press reports from July '67 claim that this superb piece of Barrett madness was set to be the band's next single, and it's hard to tell if it would have been a real smash hit or a complete disaster.
She'll be scrubbing bubbles on all fours.
Scream, Dyla, scream, old woman with a casket.
In our first introduction to the new darker Sid, he creates a psychedelic nightmare sprinkled with his trademark childlike humour.
Blam, blam, your pointers, point your pointers. Waddle with apples to crunchy Mrs. Dawes.
Who exactly ends up in the casket, which is another name for a coffin, is a mystery, and has the old woman killed herself with her blam blam pointer, and is she scrubbing up the bubbles of evidence afterwards? To accompany the planned single release, a promotional video was filmed under the title Pink Floyd vs. It. In later years, its director has vividly described how she filmed a Hard Day's Night style mini-movie in which the band were chased by a ghostly overcoat suspended by a wire. It's known to have been filmed around the back alleys close to London's Denmark Street, the area's music capital. The film's director has claimed that she had the only known copy and that it was destroyed in a house fire. However, around the time the International Times magazine reported that the film had been shown in a film festival, something that the director was completely unaware of, and therefore multiple copies of this movie must exist. Now sadly we don't have one to show you here, but with the help from animator Emmy Connor, we can imagine what this promo video just may have looked like.
My verdict is that it is a little bit of a regression to childhood. But after all, why not?
The other possible single release at this time was a track called One in a Million.
Would you like to be 1 in a million?
The track's downbeat, thumping bass line has a similarity to Corporal Clegg and suggests the song could have been written by Roger Waters. It was played live around this time, and the fact that it is cited as a possible single release suggests that it probably was recorded. And due to the lack of space in EMI's Abbey Road studios, the Floyd recorded a lot of Saucerful at the Delaney Lee Studios in London's Kingsway, and a lot of its recording logs just haven't survived. Now, for a previous documentary, I visited the studio's location to find that today it's nothing more than a basement for a supermarket without a commemorative plaque or anything, despite the fact that the Beatles and the Stones and the Who and many other legends all walk through these doors. Another popular live track, Reaction in G, is a type of heads down psychedelic groove that the band could just improvise along to all night. There seemed to be a huge disconnect between what the Floyd put out on record and what they played live, and as a consequence, the die-hard London fans felt that the Piper album was kind of a sellout, a pale imitation to their live ferocity. Whilst outside of the capital, the band were often pelted with beer bottles and coins by people who really just expected a quiet band playing radio-friendly covers. Another track that could have been included on the album was In the Beechwoods. It was originally intended for Piper, and it almost certainly would have had lyrics added to it. Now, sometime after its recording, Sid penned another unreleased track called Milky Way, the lyrics for which seem to match the melody and structures of Beechwoods. And here, you're going to hear the two of them mixed together, and it gives an idea for how this completed song just may have sounded.
How many times if I try it in the Milky Way? Half of your time beside me only. What can anyone interview in the Milky Way? Take life easy, I mean so easy. If I met you, I could tell you what to do, what to do. Hold you, hold you. I feel that if I met you, I can tell you what to do, what you do. And I tell you I love you, that you love you, inside myself every way. That you mold you, hold you, mold you, and hold you, mold you, and hold you, mold you, mold you.
Many thanks to the artist on the border, Alex, for creating that animation for us. In early October, the band undertook a photo shoot around the war-torn, blitz-damaged London Docklands, taking in nearby Tower Bridge and the St George in the East Church. The photos reflected a dark shadow that was slowly creeping over the band, and the very next day they were back in the studio again to ask the question, With its punky, new wave edge, this track sounds light years ahead of its time, and on one level, the cryptic lyrics could be Sid's reflection on his own detached, vegetative state, as if he is starting to drift away from those around him. But if they are, it shows an incredible amount of self-awareness, as if Sid is openly letting the world know that he knew how others were starting to perceive him, and it's as if he just didn't like the restrictive rock star role that he was increasingly being cast in.
In yellow shoes, I get the blues. Though I walk the streets with my plastic feet. With blue velvet trousers make me feel pink. There's a kind of sink about blue velvet trousers. In my paisley shirt, I look a jerk. And my turquoise waistcoat is quite out of sight. But oh, my haircut looks so bad.
This is a reflective Richard Wright number that had originally been written for Piper under the title of Sunshine. However, recorded in late October, it ends up casting a much darker autumnal shadow. As if echoing his long fadeaway, Sid himself adds a strange mystic calling by running his Zippo lighter up and down his slide guitar. Although it bears all of his hallmarks, the pounding drum pattern here is not actually Nick Mason, but rather producer Norman Smith. And common with many songs written in this era, the lyrics reflect a nostalgic yearning for the more simpler and carefree childhood days as the sun started setting on the summer of love.
Why can't we reach the sun? Why can't we blow the years away?
This productive month saw another excellent Wright song recorded. Issued as the B-side to Apples and Oranges, the song was introduced to most fans through the much-loved 1971 Relics compilation.
I had another drink, a drink, a drink, a drink, a drink.
At this point in time, Richard Wright was thought by many to be the one who would replace Sid as the band's main songwriter, and on Barrett's ultimate leaving the band, managers Peter Jenner and Andrew King asked Wright to form a new group with himself and Sid, something that Rick claims he would have done if he'd have thought it would have worked. As if he had become Arnold Layne himself, the lyrics to this track are based on a real-life encounter that Sid had one afternoon where he spent hours stalking an unknown girl who was out shopping.
I catch you by the eye, then I stop and have to think what a funny thing to do, 'cause I'm feeling very pain.
The band's management rushed released their song in time for the Christmas release and also to coincide with a planned American tour, and despite its distinct Christmassy feeling towards the end, the single failed to chart as the noticeable cracks in the band started to widen. Problems for the band were exasperated in early November when they arrived in America for an ill-fated tour. The band played a handful of difficult shows, in one of which Sid infamously stood vacant and just detuned his guitar strings in front of the audience. Although Sid and the band he was in were now playing different tunes, the fans seemed to really like it, and the reviews from the time were actually quite positive, as if people liked the unpredictability of the shows.
See
again, and not allowing them any time to pause or rest, on returning home, the band's management immediately booked them onto a package tour with Jimi Hendrix and the Nice. Sid's performances didn't really improve, and at least on one occasion, guitarist David O'List from the Nice stepped in to play his parts. Being known to Hendrix, it's thought that one David Gilmour was in attendance at these shows, and one can only imagine the mixed emotions he felt watching his old friend Sid on stage, by this time with the inside knowledge that he himself would soon be up on that stage. As winter fell across the land, reports came in that the Floyd's old spiritual home, the UFO Club, had closed, and as the days grew darker, it felt like those games for May were becoming a distant memory. As a swan song to this period with the band, this track is yet another heartbreakingly honest confession by Barrett that his time with the band could soon be up. The middle Salvation Army section was planned to climax in a similar way that the Beatles' A Day in the Life did, but the visiting musicians were simply told by Sid to play whatever they liked, and as a result, this middle section fails to deliver. However, as if he'd sort of wandered off mid-song, bored, and then been found again, at the very end of the track Sid reappears with its haunting and poignant coda, arguably one of the most moving and important moments in this band's whole illustrious catalogue.
And what exactly is a dream? And what exactly is a joke?
By the end of 1967, it seemed that the Floyd's summer popularity was well and truly fading, and their only accolade in the NME end-of-year poll is that they were the 10th best new group in the year, just a few votes ahead of the Flowerpot Men. At this point, the band had a fine collection of songs ready for release as a new album, a selection that reflects a growing maturity and exploration, and yet still presents the listener with Sid's infectious offbeat madness. Perhaps if this album had been released in December, then the band's story could have been different. Maybe, but then the release of Piper itself failed to reverse Sid's disinterest in the group, so probably not. Something had to be done, and fast. Sid's suggestion of revitalising the group by inviting two female saxophonists and a banjo player to join was the final straw. And the first week in January saw their old Cambridge friend David Gilmour finally join the band as a short-lived five-piece. A handful of shows were known to have taken place with the five-man Floyd on stage, and the idea of allowing Sid to remain as a non-touring songwriting member of the band, like the Beach Boys' Brian Wilson, was seriously considered. However, in mid-January, the band decided to take the difficult decision not to pick him up en route to a gig and not invite him along to studio sessions, where they slowly began to forge a new identity without him, stepping out of the winter darkness to let there be more light. Roger's bass provides a great opening to this track that gives us our first introduction to David Gilmour as a member of Pink Floyd.
Then at last the mighty ship, descending on a point of flame, made contact with the human race at Millennium. Now is the time to be aware.
The trippy science fiction lyrics centre around an alien ship arriving at Maidenhull. This is an RAF base just outside Floyd's home of Cambridge. It's a clunky, slightly dated affair with further random references from the Beatles to Anglo-Saxon warlords. There's serious speculation that in addition to David Gilmour, a lot of the guitar playing parts here were actually Sid. Barrett played his last known gig with the band after recording this track had started, and he was known to hang around Abbey Road for some time after his formal departure, so there's every chance that this song here could be his last gasp with the band. This hazy track tells the story of a brother and sister playing in the summer sunshine and evokes themes of playful bygone times. Wright himself grew up with two sisters, and this hazy lyric seems to recall the childhood fun that he had rocking back and forth on a seesaw and playing poo sticks in the river.
She goes up while he goes down.
The mix is dense and dreamlike, with a lush, floating, unmemorable melody that almost sends the listener to sleep. And perhaps it's no coincidence that the band gave it the working title at the most boring song they'd ever heard. This stomping psychedelic rocker tells the tale of a Second World War soldier returning back from home with just a wooden leg to show for his sacrifice.
He won it in the war in 1944.
It goes without saying that Waters would treat the concepts of war and sacrifice with much more reverence in future years, and although themes of post-traumatic stress, addiction, marital breakup can be found here, I think it's stretching it a little to say that this was the first brick in his wall.
Dear, oh dear, what they really stand for me. Dear, oh dear, will they really laugh at me?
In April, the band decided to take a bold move and reach out more into long-form experimental music that would cement their position at the forefront of what would soon be termed progressive rock. This track was designed on a chart by Waters and Mason like a construction diagram for a building, with lines and shapes and peaks and troughs to describe the music. Remember that the band originally met in Architects College. The abstract track is thought to be based on a battle, and it begins with a section called Something Else. Here, eerie keyboard sounds and discordant piano create an unsettling tension. The section is very reminiscent of Wright's future solo section on Ummagumma, and it was originally titled Richard's Rave Up. What follows is presumably the battle itself, subtitled Syncopated Pandemonium. The production effects here are great fun, and it's generally thought that the band themselves were responsible for a lot of the production work here as they gained more confidence in the studio. Wright's calming Farfisa organ returns again for the aftermath of the battle. Ambient tones that would become his trademark over this period. The journey finally concludes as we hear the celestial voices, the souls of the victims of the battle as they ascend to heaven. An early highlight of Gilmour's career with the band, he delivers a rousing, wordless coda to this epic piece. The importance of the Hipgnosis art team on the overall success of Pink Floyd cannot be overstated. Famously named after Barrett himself, scrawled the name as graffiti on the door of an apartment that he'd shared with these genius designers. The cover is a clever montage, and it's very skillfully done when one considers the physical way that it would have been created, cutting and pasting here, kids, with real glue and real scissors, and then multiple exposing onto a single sheet of photographic paper. I mean, they had one chance to get this right. Hidden in the image are parts of a page from a Strange Tales Marvel comic and a few illustrations from old Alchemist books. The album was finally released in July 1968, almost a full year after its initial recording had started. It made the UK top 10 but failed to chart in the US, and generally sold far less copies than Piper had done a year earlier. The reviews at the time were mixed, and they reflect a slightly disjointed album from a band in transition during a turbulent time in music in general, so much so that the Floyd's management actually decided to ditch the band and represent Sid as a solo artist instead. What the management and many others couldn't see, that Roger Waters especially could, is that large-scale theatrical productions and extended musical compositions would soon come to dominate the next decade. The band, as we all know now, were playing the long game. The events from this time will never truly be understood, but looking at it from the band's perspective, it's easy to see why they let Sid go. They were hungry 25-year-olds on the edge of stardom, something that Sid seemingly didn't want. Furthermore, it must have been difficult for them to watch their friend unravel in public and not attempt to shield him from doing so. The hardest thing to do, however, is to judge this period through Sid's wide-staring eyes. He escaped the pressures and restrictions of the music industry, but only to become forever trapped in a prison of missed opportunity, mental illness, and forever media intrusion. An unfortunate victim? A careless risk taker? Who knows? He blew it all, but then he ends up becoming the most loved, imitated, and talked about member of this band. Sid's is a simultaneously both joyous and tragic story, one that will forever intrigue, sadden, and inspire us. A life that contained more than a saucerful of strange tales, and stories that will forever remain secrets.